Welcome to the Recipes for Resilience vlog series. This is Pauliina Mapatha. I'm a positive intelligence and a life coach on the mission to inspire, support and challenge individuals and organizations with change, transformation and wellness. And today I have a guest, Valérie Besanceney, who is an author and a founder of Roots with Boots. She's an international education and transition consultant, as well as a CEO of Safe Passage across networks, which is they call it as a home to people and schools committed to healthy student, family and staff transition. And we will be talking about, well, transition, the safe transition, what is it to be an adult third culture kid, and basically hear Valérie's story and recipes for resilience. And so, as I said, Valérie is also an adult third culture kid. And though currently I know she's planting some roots in Switzerland with her husband and 2 daughters. And I also know this, that at times when she finds it difficult to focus, she might bake banana muffins. Welcome, Valérie.
Thank you, Pauliina.
So, Valérie, you identify as a third culture kid. And I would just, maybe let's start from there. Would you tell what makes you a adult third culture kid, and maybe also if you can tell a little bit more about what does the concept mean?
Absolutely. Thank you, Pauliina. So a third culture kid is any person who has spent a significant part of the first 18 years of their life outside their home country, their passport country, because of their parents' professional decisions, so or because of their choice of work or advanced training. And traditionally, these third culture kids were either foreign servants kids, children who were moved because of corporate jobs, missionary kids, children whose parents were in the military. And Ruth Van Reken, who wrote the book, who's a co-author, was together with David Pollock and Michael Pollock on third culture kids growing up among worlds, has now expanded that term into cross-cultural kids, because it's what they speak about a lot is how third culture kids, what the third culture kid, the third culture really is where you have commonality with others who grew up the same way. So where you identify with other children who also grow up as third culture kids. But the term cross-cultural kids, which is being used more widely now, covers all kinds of kids who have the experience of growing up among worlds. So that's children who grow up in a bi or multicultural marriage, mixed heritage children who are domestic TCKs, children who are adopted, children of refugees, children of immigrants, minorities, educational CCKs, so children who move because of educational reasons to another country and go to boarding school in a different country. So cross-cultural kids is really the umbrella term that's being used today. And third culture kids is one example of cross-cultural kids. So what does that mean for me, as in my own personal experience, is that I grew up as a traditional TCK. I moved around quite a few times, but within Europe because of my father's job. And then I, as an adult, I continued to move around together with my husband eventually. And we are now raising 2 cross-cultural daughters because my husband's American and I'm Dutch by nationality. And we are living in Switzerland. And and just a funny story, because I was an educator, or am an educator, but was a teacher in international schools for about 15 years. And I would often talk about this subject with my students. And then one day I had one of my students come up to me and say, no, but I had this conversation with my parents yesterday, and my students at the time were 8 years old. I had this conversation with my parents yesterday evening, and actually, you're wrong. I'm not a third culture kid. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, what are you then? He's like, I'm a fourth culture kid because of this and this and this. And that's where there's a kind of a misconception sometimes, because the third culture kid experience is really where you have your home country, or passport country, as people call it, then you have your host country, and then you're probably being influenced by many other cultures as well. And it's the third culture is where you find connection with people who grow up in a similar way. So when I went to university, because of my third culture upbringing, I very much, and I went to international schools, so that at the end of that, I really wanted to attend university in the States. So I ended up going to the University of Vermont, where I was told there was a rather large percentage of international students, 10%. But nobody had told me that out of that 10%, 99% was Canadian. So on the first day of international orientation, I found myself quite lost. And I was standing in line, and there was a girl in front of me trying to explain where she was from, and she was being asked to show her passport, and she asked, well, which one? Because I have a Pakistani passport and a Swiss passport. And then the lady was like, well, in front of her was saying, well, whichever one you use most. She was like, well, that's complicated because sometimes, and as I heard her talking, and even though we had little in common, apart from the fact that she had a Swiss passport, but I immediately felt a connection to her, because that answer of it's complicated resonates so much with third culture kids and any child who grows up among cultures, because where are you from? Where do you belong? It becomes a complicated question.
Yeah. So and well, just to reflect this, I'm also reading the Third Culture Kids book, and I think I'm a mom of cross culture kids. And personally raised and lived in a very homogeneous, very stable life until I was an adult, and then started my sort of international ventures and living abroad. So a very different experience than, for example, yours or now my own children. And you mentioned some of the sort of common challenges, where am I from, or where do I belong, or things like that. What kind of things were really, would you like to share, like as your own personal challenges, and also that how did you, because now you work in the field, so you probably overcome or find a way to belong, or I don't know. Would be lovely to hear what's your story in this.
Yes, well, I think when I present on the topic of third culture kids and transitions, and in front of parents, especially at international schools, a lot of them then ask the question, well, should I not move with my children, because there are quite a lot of challenges here? And it's like, no, absolutely, that is not at all the message I'm trying to give. I feel like there's so many benefits to moving with children. It's about how you manage the transitions, though. And I think a lot of parents have a tendency to think, well, children are resilient, they'll just adapt. And many of them do. And in my own personal experience, I was that child that adapted easily. I easily switched from educational system to another. I easily made new friends. I easily immersed myself in a new community. I usually was sad to say goodbye to my friends that I left, but I was also very excited to move to a new place. I had a very supportive home environment. So I thrived as a child growing up. But it was when it hit me as a young adult, when I moved away, when I moved to the States, when I started to ask all these questions, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Where do I see myself settling down? I felt like a fish out of water when I went back to Holland, but I certainly did not feel at home in America either. And then there was Switzerland, where I came from and where I'd lived for a big separate chunks in separate parts of Switzerland during my childhood, but I was never going to truly be Swiss. So there were all these questions that surfaced only until I was older that really, quite frankly, led to a big identity crisis at that point, because I really struggled. And it was when I read the book Third Culture Kids, while I was doing my master's in education and I was teaching at the time in Myanmar, that it all of a sudden I had this big aha moment, and I just read it and thought, finally somebody who's put words to my experience, finally somebody, and not just somebody, but there's a whole community out there of people who actually understand what it means to grow up like a third culture kid. And where I sense that growing up in the international schools, because of that feeling, just like I had that feeling with this girl at the University of Vermont, but where you don't feel like you have to explain yourself because you're all growing up in a similar experience. So you don't, but where many of us at these schools also shared the experience of going home, for example, to our passport country, to our family there, and where I struggled, explaining to my cousins what it was like growing up for me, and where they all had there are certain perceptions that others have of children growing up in an international school environment as well. And so it really, for me, it was a huge eye opener to read this book. And then I decided as a teacher at the time, well, this is great because there's all this literature available to adults, but what about the children? What about how can we translate this to them so that they are given a language they can identify with? And that led me to write my chapter book for children, which is called Be at Home, Emma Moves Again. And what I did there is I told the story through a 10-year-old girl and her teddy bear. So in each chapter, the voice alternates from her to the teddy bear, where she is going through the roller coaster of emotions of moving yet again at 10 years old, and where her teddy bear is the voice of reason, so to speak. And then following that, I created a workbook that goes with it, called My Moving Booklet, that is really a tool for teachers, but also for parents to have that conversation with their children. What does it mean like to move again? Because I think part of struggling in my 20s came out of never truly intentionally going through those transitions as a child. And I think if we give children the language, if we give them the tools, if we give them the tools to manage any kind of transition well, those are lifelong skills that will help them no matter what, but also where you want them to feel grounded and rooted, even though they're moving around again and again and again. And that's what led me to eventually step out of teaching now and to start my own consulting company called Roots with Boots.
Yeah, so that's
the sun has come up in Switzerland, so I'm sitting in the sunshine right now.
So yeah, and you are there in that nice winter sun finally coming up, whilst I'm sitting here in the summer. But I think that's so. I mean, identity crisis is not a small thing. I think, and I can just, or crisis, or like really to go through. And as much as it is part of sort of growing up, but the more there is things to sort of process or elements that you haven't yet figured out, I think the bigger process it is. And especially if, like in your case, if you mostly lived in Europe and then went to study in America, I mean, you don't stand out, you are a sort of a Caucasian, nobody probably knows all those unique influences and the sort of a hybrid whatever culture that you have and experiences that you've gone through. So probably even that, like I think if we differ, that we differ, or diversity is sort of visible, people tend to sort of foresee that there might be different thinking or culture or something, and when we blend physically in, It's an additional dimension. But so beautiful thing that this kind of challenge that then you actually took and started to process and not just for yourself, but to serve others, to help others who are going through similar things than you did since you were a child. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think part of it is also what you touch an important point there, because not only, do you tend to do a lot of people just blend in, so to speak. You also feel I think a lot of third culture kids almost feel a certain guilt for feeling like it's a challenge, because growing there's a lot of benefits. Like I said, I mean, you gain world experience, you become open-minded, you learn about different cultures, you learn different languages. There's so many benefits to growing up in an internationally global life, that acknowledging the hard parts comes with a little bit of guilt, because it's like, why am I struggling with this? I have such a good life. I shouldn't be struggling with this. There are things way bigger than this that should be, that are challenging for people in life. So it's not only do I think that the adults in the room sometimes, and with the best of intentions, because especially parents, they always have, their best intentions at heart for their child, but because we sometimes tend to think like, oh, well, children are so resilient, they will be fine. And then when they are posed with challenges, rather than actually truly comforting them in the emotions that they're feeling at the moment, we tend to encourage them and want to fix things and make things better for them. And then for the children, with myself, but also in many of my students, where I've sensed that sense of guilt, like, well, I shouldn't be struggling with this. So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah. So you sort of shared the kind of strategies that are like already a professional or like writing a book and all that. So I guess it's also processing and doing that. But were there some other strategies? Like yes, before it went into that level, what other strategies helped you to move forward?
I think, I mean, there's certainly some individual strategies, but there are also strategies that tend to do with more the belonging aspect as well. Individually, I think at a certain moment I realized I struggled a lot, and I reached out for some help, where I did find a coach who could help me see some of work through some of the challenges, and in that case I also think it's really important to find somebody that that resonates with you, and that understands the international experience in that sense, so that they can help you process some things and see it from a different light, and help you work through things. At the same time, another thing that really helped me was finding a community. I think one of the challenges is that we all struggle with a sense of belonging, no matter what. Especially as you go through your formative years, as you're developing your identity, as you're developing a sense of self, you also are looking for a sense of belonging. And even though you might find that within your friends and within that third culture that I spoke about, for me, I felt a true sense of belonging when I found out about Families in Global Transition, for example, which has a conference every year, and where the first time I attended that conference, I think back in 2015, it was a follow-up of that aha moment that I had when I read the book Third Culture Kids, where I felt like, this is like coming home. I didn't need to. I walked into a room with, I think there were 200 people at the time, and every single person I met during that weekend, I didn't need to explain myself. I could actually have the conversations about the challenges and about the benefits and about how to help students and how to work through it as a young mother at the time. And so that was a huge help for me. And through Families in Global Transition, I met Dogoda, who's the founder of Safe Passage Across Networks, which brought me into another network and family of people, so to speak, who were passionate about providing transitions care in international schools, and that's where I found my niche, where I finally, like you said, finally felt like I could contribute with my own experiences to support others in their challenges.
Yeah, yeah. So that belonging or finding your own tribe,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
isn't it? It's really based on our basic human needs
Yeah.
of social connection, and meaning feeling close to other people, and that requires that you're not standing out, but there is that sort of understanding, and that you click, and you understand each other, you connect. Such an important part,
Yeah.
in any life, and not to mention then in internationally very mobile life. Yeah, that's the families in global transition. I think annually there is a conference,
Yes,
so
no,
it's
they
coming
and they
up.
had an in-person conference, of course, until 2020. But now they have their conference. Last year we had the conference online, and now this year they're doing another conference online. And as they call it, it is a reunion of strangers, which is at the same time, they don't, like I said, they don't feel like strangers when you see them again as well. And even if you come there for the first time, it almost gives you that sense of a reunion, that you have when you have a high school reunion, or any kind of reunion where you just feel a connection with people.
Yeah.
And it was a great privilege to be serving on their board for several years, and being the program director there, and that really, anybody who's looking at the challenges of moving internationally and living that lifestyle, I highly recommend looking them up, because it's a fabulous organization to be part of.
Yeah. So for everyone, I'll share some of the resources that Valérie is mentioning. We'll share them in the show notes, so that you can look them up. You don't need to remember everything. So if you needed to just bottom line this, your purpose or your why, how would you put it?
I think my purpose, and especially once I stepped out of being a classroom teacher every day, because then, I really wanted to bring this element to the classroom, but there are just so many other elements you need to bring to the classroom, so it couldn't. So that's when I realized that I really wanted to just specifically work on transitions, and where I specifically wanted children to feel grounded because of the life that they're leading, and not in spite of it either. I want them to understand how they can use their experiences to the best of their ability to maximize what they can also bring to the world in a positive way.
Yeah, yeah. And so that is the work that you do as an independent consultant, and then also Safe Passage
Yes.
works on the same goals.
Well,
What about, you're also now, you mentioned in your introductions really that you're a mom of CCKs, and just to say, is it different to, I mean, you've got all this wealth of knowledge as an educator and as a person who really researched and gone through yourself, experienced it, and now that you are also then a mom, is there anything else that you like want to share from not just from a professional point of view, but as a parental point of view?
yes. Well, it's the one thing, and I mentioned it earlier, the one thing as a teacher that encourage parents to do is to, and those are wise words that are not originally my own. It's Ruth Van Reken who actually wrote this in as a preface to my book as well. But I always encourage parents to comfort rather than encourage. So, and that I think has been incredibly challenging in a way as a mom, because it is really hard at times to just, you have to bite your tongue a lot. You have to bite your tongue and not offer quick fix solutions, and really offer the child the space to voice their emotion and to sit with that emotion and not immediately fix it, and to be able to recognize it. And another person who I met through Families in Global Transitions is Julia Simmons, who wrote this fantastic book called The Emotionally Resilient Child. No, sorry, not. I'm saying it completely wrong. I'm looking at two books here. One is The Emotionally Resilient Expat, which I will give you the link to as well, by Linda Jansen. And then Julia Simmons' book concentrates more on giving children the tools to have a language of emotions. So to build emotion stories in your family, around stories that happen in your family. And that is something I'm really trying to do with my own children as well, is to make sure that they can not only voice their emotions, but that they can also name them, and that they can also recognize them when they feel them. And so that takes a lot of talking time, and a lot of reflecting time with them, and a lot of me biting on my tongue time.
Yeah. So I hear that if as parents we only get into the encouragement side, which you are not recommending, there is the danger that we don't make space what is.
Exactly.
What is actually the current emotion and the feeling, and processing that, or finding out why am I feeling, like you mentioned, guilt or sad or happy or whatever, but especially in transition, when you are, isn't it, you sort of say goodbye to things, or before you it's important to say goodbye before you welcome something new.
Oh, absolutely. And the book I was just referring to is called Emotional Resilience in the Expat Child, by Julia Simmons. But yes, absolutely, it is so important to say goodbye in order to give a good hello. And now that you mentioned that, I can also, let you know that the course on the laws of transitions that Safe Passage Across Networks is offering right now, that is actually one of the laws that Doug Oda writes about, how important it is to have a good goodbye, and really to allow time and space for that, in order to be able to have the space to have a good hello.
Yeah. So tell a little bit more about the the SPAN network, Safe Passage Across
Networks.
Yeah. And also about this the forthcoming course, or the course. You've already launched it, but when is the next intake?
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so it's the course is based on Doug Oda's 6 laws of transitions, where the first law is you have to say a clear goodbye in order to say a clear hello. And in the course, it's an 8-week course. It's we recommend, especially educators, to take it within groups within their schools, so that they can work on developing and strengthening their transitions care program within their school, but also to create a network between schools, so that they can have the conversations with other schools to think about what works well, what could be even better if they did it certain ways, and to learn from each other. So at the moment, we have a cohort of 28 students from international schools all over the world, and also from some organizations like international schools. And we really are actually quite blown away by because it's the first time we're offering it this fall, by the incredible rich conversations that have come from it. And each module takes about, I would say, 3 to 4 hours of work for the educators, because they're of course all very busy in their full-time jobs as educators and in their organizations, but where they really have the time to reflect on transitions care in their own life and in their school and between schools. And as a result of the success of this course, we are now offering it again in February for the second cohort. So that starts on February 4th, I think. And we are opening up registration soon. So if you would like more information about that, that is at www.spanschools.org.
So we put that link also in the show notes. So, and what I pick up here is that you are creating a community also for these educators to find a place, you know, to belong and to get the peer support of assisting the learners or students, depending at what level of school system they are working. And I believe even in the beginning, I think it's more geared for the educators who transition, but it's probably very even for parents. Is it also good for parents, this program?
It could also be for parents, absolutely, and especially parents who are very involved in parent-teacher association work, where they work with the admin and the staff on creating a strong transitions program. So in that sense, absolutely, yes.
Great, so interesting things. What about? I'm just wondering now. I mean, we're still in the pandemic. Who knows how long we're still going to be in the pandemic? In South Africa, we've gone out the third wave, sort of more recently. I know in Europe some areas are already on the fourth, so this is also affecting, you know, the mobility, the social connection. You know, like everything is most of the things are put online or transferred online. How does this? What kind of a special flavor does this bring into these transitions, or what are there some trends that
I think
are important to share?
I think the pandemic has brought so many challenges for everybody around the globe, that almost one of the positive things that has come out of it is that it has highlighted how important positive transitions are, and how important it is to have the tools to go through transitions in a positive way, especially with children as well, to give them the skills and to feel equipped to be able to cope with any transition, whether it's happening, you know, from moving from one place to another, or moving from in-person learning to online learning. And at Safe Passage as well, this is where we've done a lot of work with schools and organizations, and doing presentations on how to manage those kind of transitions now that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and how to support each other, and the importance of self-care, and how we can try to shift our mindsets in order to be able to focus on the things that we can control, to focus on the things that are important to us, to make sure that we can all continue to thrive as much as possible during this incredibly challenging time.
Yeah, and I think one thing what I've noticed is like expat community who is used to also to keep contact to, you know, the globally dispersed families and friends. I think in digital means, as well as, of course, the travel as soon as, or as often as possible. And now, but like people who are staying put, I think that's something that they've learned how they need to also try to boost the social connection, not just meeting face to face, but online, and also that I think online courses and all that is becoming more and more the norm now. So I think that's something that is maybe a gift and an opportunity for entrepreneurs and associations, organizations launching new products. So yeah.
Yes, I think it is, and it's a challenge as well to find that space where people feel engaged online as well, right? Because it is normal that people are struggling with, I mean, the Zoom fatigue and constantly having to be online. So where it when possible, I think right now it's equally important to keep fostering those in-person relationships and to have that connection. And I think a lot of people are leaning towards feeling more empowered by being able to work from home. I think a lot of it, from the conversations I've had with people, it is actually quite interesting how many people almost prefer it. And then there's also a lot of people who really miss going to the office and who really miss the personal interactions and who miss the coffee talk and who are longing for that. So it will be, again, that's an interesting transition that people are going to have to work with again as well, where we're moving from all this online engagement back into social one-on-one engagement and professional one-on-one engagement where we're working together in person, and where I can imagine that comes with its own challenges for many people as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Valerie, for your time and great tips and sharing your own experiences, which always makes it easier to follow than us just talking some theory or like teaching and giving tips, but also seeing how they can actually help to move from those challenges and see them as gifts and opportunities. And I really, I think the key sort of things, takeaways for me at least, is the identity, that, how it forms, and that when we're moving or transitioning, how important it is to say the goodbye and well, to say, you said, say good hello to the new, and that in that process there has to be that safe space where we comfort each other to go through those also that sadness or those lower emotions, and not just encourage and everything is going to be all right, everything is great. I mean, there are the great parts and there are the sad parts. That's life. Exactly. And I think that's very helpful, even for ourselves as adults when we transition, just to give ourselves that space to go through the different emotions.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the key part as well, is I think that if people recognize that transitions care is important, that people recognize what the challenges are, what the benefits are, how you can manage it well. It's, first of all, a life skill that you can apply in most situations, and we have learned that through the pandemic. And second of all, it also will allow you to be a better learner as a student. It will allow you to be more productive in everything that you're doing at work. It will allow you to probably be more productive at home as well, as a parent, as a spouse, as a mother, as a daughter, as a, every role that you are in, by working through those transitions in a positive way. It will improve your life in many ways. And there's a lot of research that has been done about that. It is, everything we're doing at Safe Passage Across Networks is also backed up by research. It's not just that feeling inside that you have a, well, that makes sense. It does make sense. And it is really good that this conversation is being had more and more, and that more and more people are interested in contributing in a positive way to that, whether it's in schools or organizations or at home.
Yeah. Thank you, Valerie. And for all the listeners, I will put the resources in the show notes. So don't stay in an awkward space in your transition. Go and get savvy, read books, reach out, go for training. And if you need more, maybe one-on-one support, consider coaching. And if you are interested, go to my website, and you can book a free discovery session to see whether myself and yourself would be a right match as a coach and a coachee. Now let's go back into supporting people in the transition. And wish you a lovely week, Valerie.
Thank you very much, Pauliina.